So just from here you can see that fall and frost has come to the garden. And this is one of the first things you learn about season protection. I mean, season extension is don't pick a place at the bottom of all the hills because you'll have frost before everybody else. If we owned land up on that hill, that's where our fall garden would be. You know,
Yeah.
We have frost. You know, it frosted everywhere, somewhat, a little bit everywhere that I went on Saturday morning. By Sunday morning, mostly, pretty extensively everywhere, but here, pretty extensively on Saturday morning. You know, and sometimes, like last year, I frosted on October 4th, and really hard here in the bottom corner. Up top, and the far right corner, there were still dahlias. There were still basil. But down here, in this corner where we had our big basil crop, all of our roselle. Do y'all know roselle? Roselle is a tropical that you use to make like hibiscus. Ah, we have somebody else. Lisa, I'm going to take back your copy.
Okay, I'm in the right place. I'm here for a friend. Is this about winterizing and
Yep,
Yes.
season extension, right.
buying things for winter?
Okay.
And we can make you
Already
another
folded
copy
it
at the end. Yeah,
because I wanted
yeah,
to-
there you go. There's a copy. Oh,
I'm sorry I folded it.
and
You
do we
can
have
take mine, it's unfolded if you want.
do we have enough? Do we have more of the consent
my
forms?
pocket.
I haven't seen any.
We'll get one when we go downstairs, I guess. Yeah, to get her to sign a consent form.
She will be here. She's coming from Biltmore.
Okay, all right. Okay, so as I was saying, roselle is a tropical that you can make hibiscus tea out of and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
It's in the okra family, totally tender, and it went right away. So anyway, let's go down and see what the frost has done, see what we can learn from that, look at what kind of systems we're using for season extension. We'll talk a little bit about that so you can actually see it, and then we'll go from there. By the way, my name is Pat. Are you familiar with Living Web Farms?
We keep reading about the classes that we want to come to, but we haven't made it. This is the first time.
You know the website, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, let's go look around. We're very fortunate here. In 2011, I taught a winter gardening class, and to be ready for that, I put loads and loads of covers out in the garden. Like most of the rows had tunnels that had PVC, UV treated plastic glazing over them, and then row cover inside them. And we showed all that, and it worked great. It actually didn't work nearly as good as the winter went on because I don't know if people remember, but it was the warmest winter I can remember. It got up in the high 60s a lot, and we weren't ready to take the tunnels off so much. And it actually got kind of hot under them, and things went to seed a little bit quick and stuff. That is pretty uncommon around here. Usually right about now, you can put a tunnel over plants, and it's actually a good thing. You know, you'll speed them up. It'll be like they're down in southern Georgia. A day like today will be much warmer. Right now under that tunnel will be cozy. You know, it'll be in the 60s still. And the plants grow faster if they don't get as cold. If it's a really warm day, you know, someplace above 50, then you want to be sure to have the tunnels wide open on both ends. If we jump up into the mid 70s for some freaky reason, you know, Indian summer or something, then you actually probably want to take the cover off, the plastic off for that day. But what you have always, this is, you know, if you decide, I really don't have time for this class, I got to go, then you just hear this part. You could figure the rest out on yourself. I sure did. Nobody ever taught me it, and it worked great, okay? And that is, if it's quarter hardy even, right, which is something like, what's quarter hardy? Oh, the Okinawa spinach that we have out there, right? If it's quarter hardy, it means that it can survive some frost, right? If you can slow down how fast it freezes, it can survive any frost. Because it can survive freezing. It just needs the time to move the water out of its cells into its intercellular spaces. And so what you do is you use layers of season extension, insulation, to keep the plants from freezing too fast. And this was really taught to me at the Highland Lake Inn, where they made this glass greenhouse that was 2 stories tall, which is really not a good idea. In the morning, it was colder inside than outside. Because of convection, and glass being the perfect conductor, it would be a degree or 2 colder out. But the plants would be fine because they had row cover on inside, and it took a while for that heat to escape. It was held in there. So the plants didn't freeze quickly. As long as they didn't freeze quickly, they didn't get damaged. So that's the trick. And how you do that on a home scale, eventually, we'll talk about it afterwards, and there's a video I can refer you to I recommend you make your own little greenhouse. And we've got a video that shows you how to make one for less than 200 bucks. Well, I take that back. Less than 200 bucks, except for you got to make your own end walls, which might cost you, depending on your skills, anywhere from $50 to $150 if you're paying somebody. But aside from that, and you could actually do a really hard to manage but very cost-effective one, simply buying longer piece of plastic and literally pulling it to its stake and tying it on both ends. And you would have a greenhouse that you would hate to use on a windy day. But it would work and it would be very cheap, you know. Anyways, until you have that greenhouse, which I recommend you get because it's heaven. It just makes winter in the mountains so much easier to take, right? But until you get that greenhouse, if you simply have hoops, and we'll talk about the many ways you can make hoops, right? And you put plastic over that and you seal that plastic, and then there's two main ways, but a myriad of minor ways to seal it. Either with staples, ground staples, which you can buy, I'll tell you where to buy them, very cost effectively. If you're willing to spend $35 or so, you can get enough to last you the rest of your life if you're a small grower. We go through a box every couple of years. You either attach the plastic with that or with sandbags. And sandbags, you can go online and find places to buy them, which are actually sandbags, or you can save all of your amendment bags and fill them with sand. And they'll last for many years before they break down because they are UV treated. And basically you just throw those on and hold it down. There's many other ways. We can talk about that if we get time, but you can figure it out. You know, you want to seal the plastic somehow, okay? And you want to kind of really thoroughly permanently seal it on the windward side, which is going to be the north or the west. But on the eastern side, you want to make it that it's pretty easy to open it up pretty quickly so you can harvest. And should it get real hot, you can open it up. Also, maybe, you know, it's been really dry, and so water hasn't been wicking up into the plants from the outside. You don't have to uncover these to get the rain because the ground around them is going to get wet, and they're going to soak that water right up. You know, it's no problem. But if it's been really dry and you only got one rain coming, then you might decide to flip it open so they can get that rain. Or sometimes when it's going to be warm and rainy, I just like to open it up and let it get bath. You know, just let it be exposed to the world again. But you have that plastic over there, and it always has to be UV treated plastic. If it's not UV treated plastic, it'll fall apart when you least want it to, and it'll break your heart. You know, it can break down in less than 6 weeks. You know, depending on how you stretch it, what strain you put on it and stuff, it can break down that fast. So definitely use UV treated plastic. 6 mil is what I recommend. If you make a tunnel, cover with that plastic, and have row cover inside. And it doesn't really matter if it's on the windward side because the plastic is what's protecting it from the wind. You don't even have to attach it. It can be loosely laid down on one side, whatever side you find it easiest to pull it over to the other side. And so a night like tonight, you wouldn't even bother. The row cover would be off it because it's not going to get that cold. But when it's going below 25, you miss 25, don't worry about it. It's not going to take severe damage. Down around the low 20s, it might take severe damage, so you want to remember to pull it over. Best practice is around 25 because then they don't slow down as much, right? You pull the cover over, you know. And let's say,
cover goes on the outside of the
no, it goes over the plants on the inside,
Oh.
okay? It's inside laying, thank you, because I didn't say that very clearly. It's laying alongside the plants that you've planted inside that tunnel, okay? And think of it as tucking the plants in, you know. It's not a very cold night, they don't need a blanket. But if it's going to be a colder night, you tuck them in. The combination of that fabric and that clear plastic, it's going to take a long time for those plants to freeze. They'll sustain no damage whatsoever. You know, it's really amazing how well it works. And it's very cost effective. When we go back inside, we'll talk about the many things you can use for hoops. Right now, I just want us to look at what we have growing right now, okay? This is going to be, you know, just an example of what we have already, okay? Cool. So think of this as a big tunnel. It's actually a little bit more effective than a big tunnel because it's a bigger area, so it's going to freeze even more slowly. When you would have to use plastic outside, we would not have to use plastic in here. It also has inflated walls, so that's 2 layers of insulation. So, I mean, really, we usually cover this earlier than we need to. We could probably wait till it got into the teens to cover here with virtually no damage whatsoever. But we're into best practice, we cover it sooner. come on in.
Thank you. That smells good in here.
That's one of the joys of having a greenhouse when it gets cold, because the smell of the earth is incredibly,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we don't know how much we miss it until we experience it, you know. So you can see no cover was used in here. It froze, the peppers weren't hurt at all. The fig tree hasn't even begun to drop its leaves, you know. It did not get anywhere near below 32 in this greenhouse. No covers, just simply because we have the mass and the insulated walls. But already growing lettuce. Here we have brassicas, turnips. Over there we have carrots. Carrots are a real joy to grow in the cold weather. I used to think you had to buy this one kind that didn't bolt, but that's called Merida, by the way. You can get that from Territorial Seed, and it's a good one to know because that's one you can put out in late September, early October. Just put row cover over it and forget about it. Come back in late April and harvest incredible carrots. It is utterly bolt resistant. It won't bolt. These other ones, you grow them either, we put ones that are 60 day in, 65 day. We put them in early enough that they'll be done before solstice, so they won't bolt. Any that we leave in after solstice, as the days lengthen, they're going to start to bolt. So that's what, you know, I thought you had to have the Merida, but then I realized as long as you beat that solstice and are harvesting them before the solstice, it doesn't matter. All of them will be the best tasting carrots you grow of the year because they just get sweeter and sweeter the colder it gets, you know. So it's one of our favorite things to do. We don't bother to grow carrots from spring into summer. Just too many diseases. They just taste soapy. They're unexciting. We grow them in probably mid to late July through mid-August for a fall crop. We'll look at those out there, okay? And then we start growing them in the greenhouse. And we do several successions in the greenhouse. We have them here. We'll plant them over at our Grandview greenhouse. We'll plant some early ones, then we'll plant some late ones. So we'll have carrots coming nonstop, okay? Nope, we don't even bother to cover those. As long as they're under plastic, they don't miss a beat. They just bear like crazy, okay? The turnips, incredibly special item to grow. We call them salad turnips. They're either the baby white ones or the baby red ones. They're, and we don't have any of the white ones here. We'll see how the red ones are. They're getting a little bit more mature now, but we'll give a try with some. They are buttery in texture, sweet in flavor, and juicy. So good that it's a crime to cook them. You know? If you cook them, they're mild and juicy. The texture's gone, the sweetness is gone, so we don't cook them. We also have beets in here. We actually, some people might find this hard to believe, but we have learned that we are happiest growing beets from seedlings. We get more reliable germination, more reliable spacing, and they don't miss a beat. No pun intended.
What's the cycle? How long?
These crops are normally 40 days. This time of year, it's going to be more like 50 to 55.
Okay.
You know, everything slows down. You know, days are all about light and temperature. So every day indicator totally changes as you go into winter. Everything takes longer, but everything tastes better too. So it's very worthwhile. Okay, so this is one greenhouse, and this. What are we extending? We're actually extending the season. Well, there's two. I define season extension two ways. The one bleeds right into the next workshop on hoop houses, right? So we extend the season by keeping crops like peppers going longer, you know. We also have tomatillos back there. We're keeping those going longer. We have a few eggplant in here. They're still going, you know. So all we need is cover, and the eggplant, the peppers, the tomatillos that'll be wiped out outside will keep producing. It's unlikely that they will have enough cold before November. Sometimes we don't have to use any heat. We're still picking them in the middle of November. It just depends on the weather. The figs, oftentimes we're still picking figs. The other kind of season extension is being able to continue to grow food in general, right? Extending the gardening season by growing frost-hardy crops, what I call the winter stalwarts, straight through the winter by using those 2 layers of cover, or in a situation like this, mostly just using the greenhouse. Though even here, when the temperatures go into the teens, we're better off to use some row cover. we'll still keep our crops alive, but they'll be slowed down and receive some damage from that deep cold. Okay, so this is our main production greenhouse. We're just starting to plant it for winter. And the reason we're just starting to plant it for winter is because, of course, we have all the fall crops outside too. And so we don't want to rush this. We want these to be relatively younger so they go longer. You know, the outside crops, my coworkers, you know, after that first year, let me give you a heads up. I have it later on, but I'll give you a heads up now. When you do that season extension outside with those tunnels, why I recommend you get to a greenhouse, there's weather where you just hate it. You know, the wind is blowing, it is cold, it is wet, it's hard to keep your hands dry, and the worst is you decide to pull the plastic off because it was nice and warm, you wanted the plants to breathe. Water pooled and all the plastic you pulled off, you go to pull it back on and it splashes into your boot. You know, that's when you think, I want a greenhouse, you know. And so we did that. Every bed out there almost was covered, and at the end of it, my coworkers all said, Pat, we got 3 greenhouses, could we please just grow in the greenhouses? And it's like, okay. You know, we showed we could do it. We'll show it to anybody again if they don't believe it, you know. But we don't have to do it, and my recommendation is the sooner you don't have to do it, the happier you'll be. But no matter how unpleasant that is, it is worth every bit of the fresh food you get if you don't have any other way to grow it, you know. I gave a class at Penland School of Crafts, winter gardening, winter cooking. We kept a list. There were over 100 items that I brought from local farms, my own and other ones, and local gardeners that had been grown in December and January. And it was a cold, very cold December. So here, this is nothing but tomatoes. And you can see, the truth is they are running out of steam from lack of light. They are not nearly as vibrant as they were, but they have no damage from the cold. And their production is not going to be stopped by the cold. It is certainly slowed down on cold days. Their production comes to a crawl, you know, but then at night, I mean, in the warm weather, it picks right back up again.
How cold do you think it got in here over the weekend?
Oh, I bet you it was in the mid-30s. Yeah, I bet it was in the mid-30s. But at the end of the evening, you know, it wasn't very long. It was mostly in the 40s and then slowly, you know, dropping to the mid-30s. This will freeze by the time it gets to the mid-20s, and there's nothing we'll do about it. We can't cover these, you know. We could actually start up a burner and heat with wood, but it's not a very clean burner and it's kind of an environmental crime, you know. So we'll probably just say, we're done. The truth is, you can extend the season of tomatoes. Another 2 weeks or so, I think it's worth it. By the time you get into the middle of November, definitely by the time you get into December, they don't taste very good. They're not getting enough light. And they kind of taste like the ones that you buy in the store, which I never buy. So why would I take the time to grow something that I wouldn't buy,
Right.
you know? So I just give up on them, you know? I mean, I'm not into growing things just because I can grow them. I want them to taste wonderful. Meanwhile, this space, we'll probably do it in cover crop, but if we needed it, we'd grow spectacular carrots, spectacular baby white turnips, wonderful spinach, wonderful lettuce. Why not use it for that, you know? I love tomatoes, and I'm still eating heirlooms. You know, I cherish them. And, you know, I love peppers, I love cucumbers. And I think it's well worth trying to extend the season by a month or something on either end. And that gives you high quality. Maybe even a little bit of heat to make it 6 weeks. You know, if you put them in mid-March or something, you probably have to heat them sometime, maybe even for 3 weeks before it's warm enough at night that you don't get them for freeze if you use row cover. And that's very, to me, cost effective. And I think it's kind of an ecological crime to burn anything to heat a greenhouse unless what you're doing is saving energy on food that would be trucked in with vehicles, which is taking more energy. So on that level, it's totally worth it. Okay, let's go look out the other stuff. This is mostly a production greenhouse, but there's one item in here that's a great example of how you can extend your season even without any greenhouses, never using row cover, simply a porch and a little bit of creativity. And by the way, Lisa, you can splice this into our greens talk. This is the New Zealand spinach I did not get to bring. There's actually a little fenugreek there, but the poor fenugreek, you can see it right there.
Sorry.
This is New Zealand. Oh yeah, and there's a tatsoi too, you're right. That's a volunteer, by the way. But this is fenugreek, which is an unusual green. It could take quite a bit of cold. You could actually grow that as a cover crop and eat it until about the teens, and then it'll die. You know, this is New Zealand spinach. These were put in late August and weren't really big enough to bother taking to a talk on September 15th. But since then, you can see what they've done. You know, and that could be done on your porch. Bring it in on the cold nights, put it out. Tons and tons of food. It'll spill down. Meanwhile, a tatsoi decided it should also get to grow. And the fenugreek is there. You could have much more of that in pots. You could actually extend the season without ever using any protection at all, except for your labor of going in and out. You know, planters and stuff like that. I'm actually telling myself I want to do lots of that next year so I can teach it the year after. Because for some people, they don't have gardens, you know, but they can still use containers and extend the season incredibly. This is a lot of food for one pot. You know, and it would come back too. Yeah, it's quite productive. Okay, we're also extending the season on ginger and turmeric, but that's going to be very short-lived if it stays here. We're going to take it over to another greenhouse where we get heat from a biochar plant, and then we'll let it go until December before we harvest it. But otherwise, a couple more nights at 50, it'll just up and die. So that's what's happening in here. The seedlings, well, what's important about the seedlings is if you have yourself a little greenhouse, you can have these waiting to replace any space that you empty in your garden. You know, a lot of people think they only have a little bit of space to grow food, but if they keep seedlings going, as they take one thing out, they put something else in, and it can be, you can get 6 crops a year, 7 crops a year out of salad greens sometimes if you really push it. You
Are
know,
the seedlings more sensitive to the cold?
they're actually less sensitive to the cold, but any plant that's in the brassica family, and most of them in the lettuce family, that get to freeze after they have 4 true leaves is most likely, almost all of them, will start to bolt after winter solstice. So what you have to do is make sure that you have a succession that's tiny right around solstice. So it passes through solstice at the less than 4 leaf stage, and then you put it in. It's not going to try and bolt until the next year, or until it has enough resources, whereby you eat it before it gets to bolt, right? To make seed. So that's the downside of these seedlings. They are very unbothered by cold. Any of these, if we had planted them out this weekend, they'd be very unlikely to sustain any damage at all. They're just so small that they just wouldn't, you know. The ground is actually going to be the last place to freeze because it's a thermal battery. And as long as any of these plants get to freeze slowly, they're going to be fine. When they get bigger, they're surrounded by more air, more convection, then they're going to freeze more readily. Okay? All right, so that's the greenhouses. Let's look and see what's happened out in the garden.
Does the 4 leaves include the cotyledons?
No.
Baby leaves?
No,
Okay.
4 true leaves.
4
Yeah.
true.
And you know, that's a rule of thumb. Don't come back and sue me, you know. But it's pretty reliable, you know. Yeah. It's a good way of stay small, doesn't have enough resources to begin to think that they've had a winter, you know. They have to have a winter as at least a teenager, not as an infant. Okay, let's head into the garden. We'll quickly look at our protection systems and what's survived with no protection, what will be needing protection. This is not hot. It's supposed to be, but it's not, so we could take it down actually if so you don't have to go under it, but you can step over that one easily and not be impacted at all. Okay, so now you're all trapped in here. Oh, no, I'm kidding. Anyway, cilantro right here. I harvested a bunch for some Thai food this weekend, but there's still some here. It is one of the hardest things. Cilantro, tatsoi, spinach and mosh, and red mustard, about the hardest plants I know. It's amazing how much arugula, how much deep cold they'll take with little or no damage. You know, they just go and go. These carrots, obviously, these were planted in early September or late August, I forget which, and have had this frost. We'll have many more. It'll just get sweeter. Eventually, there'll be enough frost, the greens will start to be hurt, but we won't care. It'll be time to pull them out. If we want to, and we tend to harvest plenty for ourselves, but then the rest just tend to go to the food banks. If I was doing this at my home, as soon as the greens were damaged enough, or I thought the cold would be enough to damage the tops, I would mulch them with leaves. And they would stay in the ground and get sweeter and sweeter. If I noticed rodents were chewing on them, then I'd take them out. But basically, these would be my homegrown carrots that were like fresh from the ground, even without leaves. Well, if I had this many, I'd be eating them in January. You know, I'd be eating them in February.
How much mulch?
Probably like that. Will probably keep them from taking any damage.
Straw or leaves? Or?
Straw tends to blow away. Our favorite is a mix of straw and leaves. The straw is more insulative. The leaves tend to keep it in place. Even the leaves, though, if you put them on and they're dry leaves you just raked, what'll happen is the next cold spell, there'll be a big front first and tons of wind. Your leaves will all be back out in your yard to have to rake, or in your neighbor's yard. So you want to put row cover over them, not to protect the plants, but for the rain to soak them and mat them. Or you can use a hose. Once they've been soaked and matted and fungi start to grow through it, then they never move. Then they're kind of locked in place. But until then, gone. Grass clippings can be mixed in also. And then if we come right this way, well, actually, I guess we'll go around because it's well, I think we can cheat right here and come through. This one here is an interesting one because I'm actually going to propose to my co-workers that we put a tunnel over this. It's cauliflower, and since it's barely, if at all, starting to make a head yet, there's a beginning of a button in there, but I'm afraid it's going to get deeply cold enough that it won't really make a big head. But if we had put a tunnel over this, we'll get gorgeous heads, you know. It just went in a little late, and I don't think it's going to, you know, it's too dangerous that in early November we get deep cold and boom. Or we just have enough consistent cold, rainy, cloudy weather that these don't get to finish right, you know. So this is something that it can take this cold. I mean, it did have some damage. You know, it had a little bit of damage from the cold, but not enough to hurt it, you know. It'll definitely keep growing fine, but growing fine and making a head are two different things. So I would actually recommend for a bed like this that now's the time to put a hoop house over it, and then it'll just go like crazy. I would not slack on removing the plastic if we got up in the 70s again, because cauliflower is probably, along with eggplant, the fussiest things you grow in the garden. You know, it doesn't like to be stopped. It doesn't like to get too hot. It doesn't like to get too cold. It really needs to. It can take a lot of cold if it's had protection and it can get it slowly, but it can't take shocking cold. You know, it particularly will go to seed first. These are rutabagas. These went in late. Once again, these are a candidate for a cover, and since we would be putting plastic on those down there, I'd probably cover this too. The cabbage, no need for protection at all. It'll make nice heads. Unless we get that, like, and we had it a year ago, maybe last year or the year before, where it got bitter cold in November. And as long as I've been here in the mountains, which is since 1978, we've never had 2 of those years in a row. Doesn't mean it can't happen this year. But that's the only thing I'd worry about. If we got bitter cold in early November, I would cover everything, no matter how hardy. Like kale and collards, I think, are very hardy, but they cannot take that transition from this warm weather to that bitter cold weather. They need some help. So I would cover them through that. And row cover would be more than enough for this. This just needs to be slowed down a little bit before it gets hit. Watch yourself. These are the sandbags here, by the way. We also have the ones you buy, but this is just an empty amendment bag full of sand. And I used to use staples. They actually are more of a pain than sandbags. Sandbags are in the way more. They're kind of a pain to deploy, but they're much easier to take on and off. Pulling those staples out on cold mornings, no fun, you know. Or putting them back in on cold evenings. It's interesting to note that some plants will bear tons of cold and even still flowering, things like borage. It's a wonderful winter farmscaping plant. It's also a source of some greens. I don't know that you want to eat tons of them, but it's a nice addition to your crops. Part of getting ready for winter, we're due to either mulch these strawberries or put row cover over them. And it's not because they'll die, they most certainly won't, but what will happen is deep cold will damage the early buds, and those early buds are the early strawberries. So if you want the early strawberries, you protect them. And mulch is just as good as row cover, a lot cheaper. These leaves, this is an example of using your local resources, taking advantage of them. We had a neighbor who mows all his leaves, and he used to burn these. It's terrible for the world, you know. And now he can just drive over with his mower, drop them here. They're chopped up. They're prime mulching material. He loves just delivering them. We got a new gate right there, so we can drive in the one gate, dump them off, and go out the other. He's, you know, we're all just happy as can be, you know. It totally works. So here you can see the sandbags deployed. We'll pull a couple off. Look at some of the crops. And you can see one of the more commonly used sources of hoops. These are fiberglass rods. You can get them from, and this is beets and kale underneath here. And you can get these rods, these fiberglass rods, from places like Seven Springs Farm Supply. I think they cost something like $1 or $2 each. The thing to know is you always use them with gloves, or you get little fiberglass splinters. So you want those gloves. You know, probably not. We use the greenhouses. If I had less greenhouses, I certainly would. The place I'm going to recommend plastic is over that cauliflower. These guys won't need it. They'll mature quite well with just the row cover.
Is this the fabric for the tucking in, so to speak?
Yes.
Got it.
This is row cover. And there's many varieties. Agribon is one. But there's two main types. One's made out of polyester, and it's the original name for this, which is Rime. People say to use Rime. I prefer the polypropylene ones. I find the Rime to be more abrasive and less long-lived. Any of it will tear up. Probably the worst enemy of this fabric is a dog. Dogs will run right through it and tear it up. If you're careful with it, you can use it for years and years. I'm pretty infamous for making mine last forever, and you know, tying little holes together and stuff, because I hate to throw away this kind of stuff. My coworkers would prefer that we use newer stuff. For good reason, it's more of a pain. But the truth is, those holes right there, you would think, oh my God, all the heat's escaping. Not really. Enough heat's escaping that it'll cool a little faster, but that's a small hole. And there's a lot of space. It's all about the space. All the way up at the other end, this hole is not affecting it at all. It's making it a little bit colder right there, and that's it. These are pak choys. Both the red and the green, really some of my favorite winter vegetables. Really juicy, luscious. The purple is so mild and tender that I think it makes a fine salad green. You can tell me if you agree. Just take a piece off, pass it around. And it's just totally lovely. You're not going to get a very good shot of it tonight, but you've had shots of it before, right? So these guys will just take the cold. Over there, Chinese cabbage. This is the stuff that we have going in this garden. The only other thing that's different is the vegetables change in a few other sites, and behind, it's going to be dark before we get there, behind the third and fourth houses down the road from right here, we have what was our summer squash patch, and we still have Thai squash backs there that, if they can ripen on the vine, will be more flavorful. So we have row cover over those. And row cover is enough to keep them alive through this kind of cold.
Are you taking this off during the warmer days?
We'll take this off if it warms up completely, because they'll get more light and grow. If we had plastic on, we wouldn't take it off unless it got very warm. But this takes more light out. This takes 15 to 20% of the light out, and that's going to slow down the growth quite a bit, you know. And might even make you feel concerned about nitrate buildup. We'll talk about that more later on. If you harvest this on a cloudy day with the cover on, there might be more nitrates in that vegetable than you want to eat.
How soon in the day, if you're going to remove it, do you take it off?
Oh, if there's no frost, first thing in the morning. Yeah, get it going. You know, let it get the light. These guys can take a lot of cold, and it's going to be warming up so fast that won't. The light's more important than anything else in that situation. Basically, there's no vegetable out here that we wanted to have survive that we didn't do something to that needed it. There's some that didn't need it, so we didn't do it, you know. And then let's go grab a couple of turnips, and we can grab a knife and we can see how they taste. They're a little bit older than I'd like, and they're white. We don't have any white ones here, unfortunately. But in the radishes too, we have some radishes, and they'll be a little hot because they're daikons, but they should also be quite sweet, and it's great for you to see that. We'll talk about why that is, why they get sweeter.
What weight do you use?
We use, this is the mid-weight. We have heavyweight, we use it once in a while. We have a little lightweight that we think about using for insects, but we never get around to. You know, it can be used for some insect situations, but we find farmscaping far more effective. And we don't need, and we also are applying nematodes, which take care of a lot of our insects too. So we haven't needed to use that. We may have to. We got some nasty bugs on the horizon. If we could figure out how to cover the entire raspberry bed and keep it pollinated, we would cover it because of the spotted wing Drosophila. But unfortunately, the need for pollination means that it's not worth doing. You know, I used to really be a big fan of the lightweight stuff when I didn't have enough farmscaping to control cucumber beetles, because they can cause awful wilt on cucumbers, and this kept them off. You know. And I grow the geonosis, whatever, the ones that didn't need pollination, which I just can't figure out how to say it right this second. It went out of my head. But anyways, so I'd grow those that didn't need pollination, and I'd grow them under cover, the lightweight cover, and I could grow cucumbers. I haven't had to do that for years because we have farmscaping that controls them. These are the turnips. We'll just find a couple of the smaller ones and try them. And see how they are. I have no idea if they'll be like I described, because they've been in for quite a while. And I'm much more familiar with the white ones, though these are quite nice too. And theoretically, the red will have some nutrients in it that the white ones won't. Anyway, those are all turnips there. That's about what there is to see in this garden. Like I said, we'll take a look at the Okinawa spinach, see if it actually died completely or not. That's a new one. I'm quite fascinated by the fact that it's basically a tropical, warm weather source of greens, and it survived the first night's frost. Actually, I know it survived the second night's frost too, but it lost most of its leaves. The thing is, had we covered it with row cover, it probably would have survived the second night's frost, losing hardly any of its leaves. Had we used row cover and plastic, it probably would have seen no damage at all. So it's the perfect example of a half-hardy or quarter-hardy plant that can take a lot of cold with protection.
What are we looking for?
Okinawa spinach. Here we go. And it didn't make it. It totally bit the dust. But on Sunday morning, it still was doing fine. There's no sign of life now. I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't get these stalks to root, though. But it totally got taken down. On Sunday morning, most of the leaves are dead, but I actually brought enough home to put in Thai cooking. And I actually saved a couple of those shoots that I can root. And that was totally a revelation to me. The longevity spinach was not as hardy, but also didn't get wiped out the first night. And so why I think that's important is oftentimes we are not as on top of it as we want to be. We don't get our winter greens in early enough, and they're still small, and we're tempted to pick them, and they never get a head of steam. If you can keep these kind of summer greens going with protection, you can let the other ones grow well into November before you start picking them. By that time, these are going to either be dug up or allowed to die because they're just not that hardy. But you can keep them going pretty long with protection. And so that's the revelation, this year's revelation. Every frost teaches me something new. And this year it was about longevity and Okinawa spinach. I thought they were utterly tender, and no, they're about quarter hardy. Okay, I think that's it. Let's head back to the light and the warmth. And we'll continue this discussion a little bit more comfortably and a whole lot more visibly. Being covered with plastic and having the row cover off the hoops and inside ready to be pulled over the plants on cold nights. And that's what your season extension would look like. Or if you're going to be done with them before it gets so cold, you can do what we're doing. You know, everything that I showed you is far enough along that it doesn't need that plastic, you know. The one thing I think needs the plastic out there, well, the two, is the cauliflower and, the rutabagas, cauliflower and rutabagas.
Would you still use it as fiberglass?
Well, we're going to talk. There's actually many other options.
Right.
Yeah. And I actually have never gotten around to buying those things. I have so many other things I'd use those first. But I understand. What's nice about those is they come straight again, so they're easy to store.
Oh, yeah.
Everything else you bend, and that's just not an easy shape to store.
Right.
You know. So they do have their advantages, but they're not nearly as nice as the other ones. Oh, we never brought chairs up. Sit anywhere, yeah, absolutely. Make yourselves comfortable. The printer was recalcitrant enough, I forgot to go down there and get them. If anybody really needs a chair, though, we can take a break and run down there and get them. All right, so a lot of the vegetables that you grow this time of year are very special because you grew them this time of year. They're at their very best. You know, spinach is at its tastiest. The radishes, even if they're hot radishes, are hot and sweet. I like a hot sweet radish a whole lot better than a plain old hot radish, you know. Some of my very favorite radishes grow this time of year. Watermelon radish can only be grown, planted sometime between the end of the first week of August and the middle of September. You wait much longer than that, it'll never make much of a bulb. You want to try?
Thank you.
Avery, you want to try?
He loves everything. Everything.
Good? That's because of the cold. They would have been quite nice before the cold, but not like it is now. You know, the cold really makes a difference. Pass it back to your camera person. Pass it back to the other camera person here.
If you
Okay.
grew these in the summer in a container and then put the container in the fridge,
Why not grow things that work great in the summer? Yeah. It's ecologically a stupid thing to do. I don't know if it'd work. It'd be a lot of trouble. You know?
Well, that's so good.
it is, yeah.
Maybe that's why. Maybe because you have to have something this good. You know? But you're going to need a big fridge. You know? Yeah. Maybe you get a walk-in and a grow light and you just grow them in there, right?
Yeah.
Then you get the award as the most unsustainable garden. You know? Okay. By the way, this is here. Help yourselves. I'll get it out of the view of me so you can sneak over and eat more if you want. But you notice it's got the hot and the sweet.
Yeah. It's not too hot either.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start from the top. Basically, the frost came. It's always too soon, right? My joke is gardeners' #1 defense against frost is denial. It's very effective until the frost comes in a big way. Then it utterly fails you, but it sure is comforting until it comes. And you know, I wasn't here today because I worked all day Saturday because I didn't want to believe that we were going to have enough frost that we had to dig our sweet potatoes. We got tons of sweet potatoes, but you know, there'd be a few big ones and then a nice handful of ones that were only about yay big. If I could have kept those going for another 3 weeks, we'd have a bunch more big sweet potatoes. So Monday, Tuesday, I could have started digging sweet potatoes. No, I didn't know how much frost there was going to be. Rocco and I talked about it. If it wasn't going to be extended, we were going to cover them. Of course, by Friday, it was like, dig the darn sweet potatoes. So we spent all day Friday and half of Saturday, more than half of Saturday. I put 6 hours in Saturday digging sweet potatoes, harvesting tomatoes, things like that. And that's denial. That's just refusing to accept that the time has come to get real, dig the sweet potatoes in your work week, and go home on Saturday like you're supposed to. You know? But I'll probably never stop doing that because I'm always hoping. And so it's just too soon. You have to give up on peppers, squash, eggplant, lots of flowers, and basil. You don't if you want to protect them. But if you think you're going to protect them, you have to grow them in a way you can protect them. If you walk in there and look at our peppers, it'd be pretty hard to cover those because there's a stake that's sticking way above the peppers. So you'd have to put a stake in that you thought was going to get no higher than peppers so you could put a piece of row cover over the whole thing. And for peppers, if the temperature's going much below freezing, you need to come back with plastic. Now, you could get away, and you'll take some damage on the leaves, but you can get away with just throwing the plastic right over on top of the row cover. Those 2 layers will still do it for you. If you could separate them at all, it'd work all the better. So maybe you'd put the row cover over, come in, and maybe what we could use, flower pots. You'd kind of jam the flower pot over each stake, and that would give you like that much distance, and that space would make it even protect better. You know? This is not farm scale advice. If you're a farmer, let it go. No money to be made. You know? But for home growers, maybe even market gardeners with the CSA and members that can't let go of those peppers, eggplant, or tomatoes. And I'm going to tell you right now, the one that it's most worth doing it with is the pepper. Because the eggplants, they're going to be okay. They're not going to be noticeably better. And you know, usually people aren't that crazy for eggplant that they need you to go to great heroic efforts to save them. The tomatoes, like I said, they're going to start tasting not as good. You know, so the ones that's going to pay off the best is going to be the peppers because they're going to get sweeter and sweeter as it gets colder. They'll tend to ripen quicker because they're in a hurry to make seed. They know the end is here. So you'll be impressed at how much faster you get them ripe, and they're going to be so sweet. They're wonderful. The only peppers I tried to save were 12 habaneros, which we got somewhat of a harvest from, but there's tons more out there. And the ones that come in after this cold are going to be vastly superior to the ones I harvested before. They're going to be sweet. Now, most people who hate hot stuff would say, how can you tell the difference? But you can. If you know how to use them, you can actually tell the difference. So of these, the things I would protect probably would be the peppers. Summer squash, just because it's so easy. You can cover it pretty easy. Summer squash is actually pretty tolerant to cold weather, as long as it doesn't freeze. So you could keep them going for a while yet. The truth is, although you can keep them going for a while yet, their yield will get smaller and smaller simply because of decreased light. They really need a lot of light to produce. But all of these here, flowers, you know, you could keep your zinnias and stuff going by just throwing row cover over them, and they'll go for quite a while. With that, that's enough protection. But once again, it depends on how big they are and how much effort you want to put into that. You know, it can be done. I mean, literally, you all could learn to make hoops and throw a big piece of plastic over a whole little garden, and just not acknowledge the weather. Just keep going. You know, the thing is, you want a winter crop too. So if you don't have a way to grow lots of plants that get nice and big while you're still pushing the summer, it won't really pay off. So those kind of things, too soon, there are things you can do, but really my advice is to, and I say it further down there, triage. Decide what really pays off to save and put your energy there. But it's amazing with a little bit of layering of stuff how long you can keep things going. The totally tender, if you keep them going, you'll have to use row cover and plastic. And at a certain point, you do just have to let them go. I'm saying what I just said there. The somewhat hardy. These are things like chard. Chard's actually pretty darn hardy, but without protection, it will take a hit. It'll take quite a hit. So you've got to give it protection if you want to keep it going. Let's see. Chinese cabbage, pretty darn hardy. Once again, though, enough cold, it'll get enough burn that'll start to rot, and the rot will spread through the Chinese cabbage. I mean, you can just harvest it, make kimchi. It stores very well. I just ate the last third of a Chinese cabbage, which had fallen to the back of my produce drawer, that we harvested in July.
Jeez.
And it was perfectly good. I had to peel off about 3 layers,
Right.
but then it was just like a really nicely blanched Chinese cabbage, perfectly good. Diane had actually pulled it out for compost. I looked at it and said, "My compost." So I cooked it. It was just fine. Once you got past the outside layers, it's a storage cabbage, so you don't have to keep it in the ground. But if you want to, if you have a lot of it and you're not ready to make kimchi, then using layers, you can easily keep it going. Fabric alone will do it for quite a bit of temperature. I'd say down to about 25. After 25, you probably want to go with the plastic. But I mean, also if they're not ready yet, you can get them to finish. You may need to, if they're nowhere near ready, you may need to use a tunnel, but you can get those guys to keep going. Broccoli rabe, celery, Okinawa spinach. By the way, I don't know why the I is in there. That's one of my many typos. The I has nothing to do with anything. It's Okinawa spinach. It's not spinach. Spinach is not somewhat hardy. It's hardy. Totally hardy. And watercress. All of these, enough cold and they'll be damaged, but with row cover and plastic, you could push these guys way into December. I mean, with a little bit of effort, you could take them through the winter and be harvesting them and eating them. They all would do it. And just know that that's a possibility. What we've discovered here, though, is there's a fungus called black rot that has become the bane of our broccoli and broccoli rabe. Although we can keep the plants going, we can get the heads, as soon as it gets wet and cold, we get this rot. And it's utterly maddening because you see one little spot, you go to break it off,
It's in there.
you smell, you go to break off more, eventually the whole thing stinks. Just like, even though it doesn't look rotted, Anything that smells like that, I don't want to eat, you know.
Where is it, in the stem or is it?
No, it's in the buds.
It's in the bud.
It affects the buds, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a heartbreaker, you know.
Just that brassica.
Just the budding brassicas, you know.
Cauliflower.
Cauliflower, we tend to not try and push it that far, but it seems to be less prone to it, you know. Seems to take it better. And the purple cauliflower is remarkably cold hardy and remarkably not susceptible to stuff like that, you know. But it's not a producer as far as broccoli, because it doesn't make any side shoots. So it gives you one head and that's it, you know. And of course it turns green when you cook it, which totally frustrates the chefs. And there's all kinds of myths that you can do this or that to keep them turning green. None of them have worked for me. Let's see, celery. Celery is probably past somewhat hardy. It's reasonably hardy. I wouldn't say quite hardy, but reasonably hardy. It's not as readily damaged even as chard, but it will take damage eventually. It is way worth giving it protection because the best tasting celery you've ever grown is celery you grow in the winter. It is sweet and juicy and way less fiber. It's a revelation. So I recommend using the protection for that. And I am kicking myself that I did not start celery yet. I'm going to start it tomorrow and see if I can get it to, well, actually I should probably wait now to start it until closer to solstice so it's not too big, so it doesn't bolt, and then get it to come in the spring. But eat it before it gets hot, you know. It really thrives from that. The winter stalwarts, lettuce, rutabaga, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, kale, collards, turnips, beets, radishes, parsnips, and carrots. The radishes, parsnips, and carrots are the ones that you want to mulch them once they've made the roots, because they can take that cold. They won't get killed, but they'll get this kind of corky, lousy texture if they freeze and thaw too many times. But by mulching them, they'll go straight through the winter and just get better and better. The problem is that mulch, especially if you're row covering the greens, is like a neon sign for voles. So keep your eyes out, because you may think I got tons of food there, and you go in and you look, and they'll eat enough, right, that you think you still have food, because they haven't killed it, and the root will keep making greens, but there'll be hardly any root left. So pay attention, and you know, just trap them. You can trap them, or harvest if you don't want to trap them, but don't let them get your food. And sometimes you luck out; they'll never even find them. The heavier your soil, the better off you are. We purposely grow sweet potatoes in the heaviest soil I can find to thwart the voles, and it's very effective.
Yeah.
We have way less damage from voles. They just don't want to work that hard. That's kind of counterintuitive because, of course, you think roots want lighter soil, but you know what? Those roots aren't wimps. They can handle it. You know, carrots might be a little funny shaped, but the sweet potatoes look like corkscrews sometimes. But they haven't been eaten by the voles, and I don't really care what the shape of the cork. It's kind of fascinating, actually. Okay, another misprint there, and I fixed that twice, and somehow it still is missing the T. It's not Clayonia, it's Claytonia, also known as miner's lettuce. Incredibly hardy as long as it has one layer of protection. It doesn't need the 2 layers, but it needs 1 layer. It'll die pretty quick in like 25-degree cold without any protection. But at the Highland Lake Inn, I watched one that was just underneath the loading dock. That much protection, near a building, under the loading dock, took the entire winter, no matter how cold it got. But without any protection, mosh, on the other hand, if you don't want to do any protection at all and you want to always have greens all winter, just grow mosh. It's never a very big green. It gets about this big at the most. It's also known as corn salad. The texture is amazing. It's buttery. It has a floral aftertaste, and it is the hardiest vegetable I've ever seen. No cold I've ever seen has damaged it in the least. It'll freeze solid, come back every time. Obviously, it can get that water out of its cells really quickly. Mache, M-A-C-H-E, also known as corn salad. Okay? It's called corn salad because before Columbus got to the New World and the Europeans decided that the maize that's grown here was corn, and that's the only thing we called corn, all grains are called corn. And it grew in the fields of Europe amongst the grains, so it was called corn salad. Salad mustards include Mizuna, tatsoi, arugula. I separate that one. And all the various mustards, they all can take tons of cold. They just get sweeter and better. And most of them, I wouldn't even bother to protect them with more than 1 layer until you're down into the low 20s. They're pretty darn hardy. Once you get in the low 20s, you need another layer. But they'll just go all winter if you do that. But be warned, These in particular, come the week after Christmas, they're going to start to bolt reliably. They've had enough cold, the days are getting longer, and maybe not the week after, but the first week of the new year, they're going to start to bolt. So just be ready to have successions going. Let them go. By the way, the flower tops are pretty good to eat. I mean, you know, flower buds. So you haven't lost anything. You still get to eat them. Parsley, dill, cilantro, and chervil, all those with protection. And indeed, the parsley and the cilantro without protection will go way into the cold. But with protection, straight through the winter. So they're very productive. You can get a lot of nice herbs that way. We use the heck out of those kind of herbs in the wintertime. By the way, pardon? One layer is plenty. Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you get down into single digits, then it's almost anything. You might as well give them a little. They're going to be insulted. Probably they won't die, but they'll be limp. They'll be a little bit hanging. They won't be as productive. Whereas if you give them another layer, they'll just keep going. You know, they'll just be cranking along. Okay, so triage. I kind of already talked about that. I mean, you make your decisions, right? This frost is coming. You know, maybe I don't cover those habaneros, but maybe I don't give up on getting the ripe ones. Maybe I pull the plants and hang them in a place that doesn't freeze. The plant is not dead, right? The roots are still on it. I didn't cut it off. That'd kill it, right? But the roots are still on it. It's just struggling. I hang it. Every bit of energy is going to go to ripen those peppers and make seed. I'll get way more ripe peppers. I've done that with tomatoes, peppers, eggplant. All of them have gotten the food further along. Now, it's not going to take a tiny pepper and make it a big one, you know. But the ones that are big and dark green will get light, and then you can take them off and put them on the counter, and they'll even color up even more. You know, you can actually get them to ripen. So it's a way, you know, to decide, I have this much fabric, more importantly, this much energy, the wind is getting stronger, it's 10 o'clock, you know. I'm not going to try and save the basil, I'm going to make pesto. I'm not going to try and save the peppers, I'm going to pull them up and put them in. What I'm going to cover, you know, not the hot peppers, I'm going to cover the sweet peppers, I'm going to cover some of my winter crops that are not, you know, going to be hardy enough, things like chard and things like that. I'm not going to try and save everything because I can't save everything well, you know. And there's some things to know. Before I had row cover and plastic and became a well-equipped winter gardener and season extender, the array of things that I covered my garden with was very humorous, you know, and very creative. And I learned very quickly that some things were not nearly as effective as others. I already had row cover, but I hadn't used it as long. So there was a place where I covered, hi there. Hi. Welcome. You were the person that couldn't get here at 7:30. I'm glad you came. There's still, we'll squeeze a bunch more in the next 25 minutes, and we might even go a little longer if people are okay with it. What I quickly discovered was that not all covers are equal, and you may think that a cover is better because it's heavy. So we had blue tarps, we had sheets, we had row cover, and we were, you know, covering the garden, and buckets, you know, white buckets. We covered everything with everything we could, just because we did denial, and then we realized denial was no longer working, so we had to protect things. And we covered a lot of our garden, including a basil bed, half with a blue tarp, which is nice and thick and heavy, you think should give a lot of protection. The other half with what was probably medium weight, but might have even been summer weight fabric. When I say fabric, I'm talking about the floating row cover. Do you know what that is? Yeah. Okay. So we covered half and half, right? Came out in the morning. Covering was largely successful, with the exception of the basil cover with the blue tarp, black and dead, even though it was heavier. Why? Because it was dark. And kind of a, you know, thin plastic ultimately. I mean, plastic is not as good an insulator as row cover. So the combination of dark and not an insulator, it got damaged. Indeed, the row cover might, I don't know, this is just a theory, but there is a way that like light colors will reflect heat back. The row cover might have been reflecting the Earth's heat back on those plants. I don't really know. I do know that it was way more successful than the tarp, even though you would think the tarp would be the most successful thing.
The soil is a battery. It's charged by the sun.
Yes.
The light row cover lets more sun in to charge the battery.
Well, see, no, we covered these things when there wasn't any more sun. But it's not just a solar battery. Yes, there is heat from the sun, but also, of course, there's heat from our molten core. The soil is never as cold as the air, you know. And indeed, most places it stays someplace in between 55 and 45. Not talking the far north, but down here, you know. I mean, you go deep enough everywhere, it's nice and warm. You know, you get deeper and deeper, of course, it gets hot. And so, we always have heat coming from the earth, and I think the reflective part plays a role. There used to be a fabric which no longer is around, and I'm forgetting the name of it now, but it was a high-tech fabric made from an alcohol, and it was designed to reflect. It was aluminized, and it was incredible what it did, but it was very pricey and didn't hold up very well. So it had a short tenure with farmers. I mean, pricey, doesn't hold up well, doesn't much work. Anyway, know that if you're going to do that kind of triage, you're going to have to really figure out what materials you have best and use your best stuff for the stuff you most want to keep going, and just take whatever shot you can. I mean, I've literally just taken black fabric and thrown it over something that I'm kind of trying to save, And, it's kind of worked if the frost wasn't too heavy and the thing was kind of hardy anyways. It just was enough. What you haven't heard yet, but I'll repeat for you, is that for most things that can take any cold, if you can just simply slow down how quickly they get cold, they don't take damage. Now for peppers or something, you have to keep them from freezing. But actually, even for peppers, if you can keep them from freezing too quickly, then the peppers which are under the leaves get insulated by those frozen leaves. And oftentimes you'll come out and the plant is toast because you didn't have enough protection, but the peppers are still good because you had the insulation of those frozen leaves. So you can keep that stuff going, and then what I was saying is you have to do triage. You have to decide, what crops are most worth saving. Lots of times it's like, okay, I'm pulling most of this stuff. I'm only going to try and save a few things. I care about what I have in the ground that's going to keep going. And that's where most of my energy is going to go. It just depends on how much I was into denial and how much time I have to protect. Something else as far as, even if you're into denying the frost is coming, you know that only works for so long. You know where you live, and you know that inevitably there will be frost. You might hope that it doesn't come till the first week of November or even the middle of the first week of November, but it's coming. You can count on it, right? And you also know that it's probably going to come in with a big front. And that big front's going to mean there's warm air meeting cold air, which means we get a lot of, yes. And if you don't want to look like the I Love Lucy show, you want to take all of your season extension stuff and set it up before that, right? So before the wind comes in, and usually here, because it's our job, we set it up the day before. But we know the wind's coming, we set it up the day before. We don't want to be out there trying to get that fabric down and sealed on the windward side the day the wind is blowing like crazy, because then it's blown out of our hands and we look silly and we're frustrated. But on a nice calm day, how easy it is to come out and lay that fabric down, roll it up into a nice tight little rope, and seal that edge with either staples or sandbags, or since that edge is going to stay down all winter, if you didn't want to have to do those things, you could hoe out a little trench, stick that fabric in there, and put soil over it, and that would hold too. I mean, there's numerous ways. We've used rocks. We've used boards.
Railroad ties.
Pardon?
I have railroad ties.
Railroad ties. I don't recommend railroad ties because one time I tried to buy them from a railroad. They said, we treat them as toxic waste.
Well, old railroad ties in the yard.
That have been around forever and maybe don't have as much creosote. Yeah, you sure couldn't certify with them. You sure couldn't certify with them, but they'll add weight. Anything will add weight. But the easy ones are sandbags and staples. And if you're doing this in a major way, some consistent product that you can use consistently rather than odd, weird things that you're trying to figure out how far they hold down and stuff work better. I've certainly used many other things. We could, if we had all night, I could jam with you all night long about the different ways I've held row cover down and how successful or unsuccessful it's been. At the bottom of here, I talk about the upside and downside of season extension. We'll get to nitrates, which is the downside. The other downside, and I've had it, I belong to a community, I had fabric and trees, I had to wait for it to come out on its own. It just, what I used, and I used staples, but not close enough together, and it wasn't as strong a fabric as I wanted. It was so high up in those trees, it sat there for 4 or 5 years, everybody had to look at it. Not a good thing. Fortunately, it was pretty much out of the main way people walked, but if they got in there far enough, they saw Pat's, crop of row cover in the trees. So think about that, and actually remember, seal it well enough you don't get sued. You don't want a piece of fabric blown out of your garden onto somebody's windshield, So take it seriously. I have a partner that makes sure I take it. It's a good thing about partners. They don't let you take those chances. So triage is an important one. keep your harvest going with new plantings. And the first thing I'd probably think about covering is the crops you've already aced. You got that watermelon radish in on time. You sure want to be sure it doesn't take damage. It doesn't take much protection to keep it going. You got your broccoli rabe in, so it's going to come in before the hard frost, where you start to get that black rot. That's going to be a spectacular gourmet vegetable. Give it whatever protection it needs. And so those are the first things you protect. And just for review, the way you're going to protect them, if it's not a deep cold, row cover alone, right? You might set up your hoops and put the row cover over the top. The reason that that's a little more effective is that if it surprises you, goes to 29, 28, the row cover will still protect the bulk of the crop, but where it touches, there'll be freeze damage. Okay? Where it doesn't touch, you got that space, there won't be the damage. Now, if you put the hoops over, then it doesn't touch anywhere. And you only need the row cover, right? Meanwhile, you go out and you spring for your UV treated plastic. Deeper cold is coming, and besides that, the days are cold, the nights are cold, things aren't going to grow as fast. You come back, you take that row cover off, you put it back under the hoops. Remember, it doesn't matter if it's on the windward or non-windward side, because you're going to glaze those hoops now with UV treated plastic. You're going to seal that, have the ends able to stay open but able to be closed. We'll talk about how to do that in a minute, right? And you might decide that your hoops, you want them to be pretty strong so they're less likely to collapse in snow. So if you want to do that, you also get some thinner wire. Could use stout string, but I prefer wire for this. Stake it at one end of the hoop of the tunnel that you're making. Attach it there. Come around your first hoop. Hold that hoop in place. Pull it around and pull it as tight as you can. If you don't hold it in place, that hoop's going to go all the way towards you, right? Then bring it to the next one. Do the same thing. Then you're making basically a wire purlin, and that's going to give you more rigidity. And it's going to be able to shed snow more before it collapses. Pretty much, unless you make your hoops out of rebar or metal conduit, your hoops will collapse eventually in the snow. And you know what? It probably won't matter that much. Most of those vegetables can take that. They'll be a little crushed, but because they're insulated, they'll be fine. And it's okay. You won't be able to get to them until after the snow's gone, though. So if you make it, yes?
Did you tie it on it?
Not till you get to the other end. You just wrap it tight around each one, pull it to the next one, wrap, then you get to the far end and you tie it to another stake. The downside of this is, unless you do it very close to the tunnel opening, it's hard to pull your plastic and seal it, right? Because there's going to be this long wire coming out, and your plastic has to follow it out before you can seal it down. And most people are going to seal their ends not with some kind of nice wooden thing, but simply by pulling their plastic in, tying it up. Sometimes you'll throw a stone in there and bind the plastic around the stone and then tie it, because it's easier to tie it and it won't slip off. And that's how they're going to stake that down. That's how they're going to close their ends. There are many other ways to do it, but that's probably the most straightforward. If you do that long purlin wire, then that could get in your way unless you pull it really sharply straight down, which can work. It's not going to be quite as strong, but it's going to be quite strong. So that's just an addition. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about what you use for hoops. Out there you saw the fiberglass hoops. Probably the most cost-effective, quite serviceable, and readily available material is 9-gauge wire. 9-gauge wire will make a fine hoop. It's not nearly as strong or easy to use as a fiberglass, but it's plenty strong enough, right? And it sure is reasonable. So you just need some good wire cutters. 9-gauge wire, you can make what, and the nice thing is it comes in a roll, you can make whatever size hoop you want. If you have really hard ground, for a lot of these hoops, you want to get it wet before you try and stick the hoops in, because it's not going to want to go in. But if it's wet, it'll slide in quite easily. It'll work quite well. Okay, so 9-gauge wire is a great one. While staying on about wire, does everybody know what the concrete reinforcing wire looks like? I like to use it for tunnels. It's the rusty stuff that's got nice big spaces in between it like this. It comes in big rolls. Back in the early 2000s, I could pick up a roll, I think 50 feet, for like less than $100. I don't know what it costs now, but very cost effective. What I like to do for home gardens, and I did for the Mountaineer, where I ran a garden for a bunch of people, is I made tomato tunnels out of that concrete reinforcing wire. Come winter, I simply open it up and flip it over something, and it's a tunnel. And it's pretty strong. It takes more snow than 9-gauge wire can take by far. It's not very convenient as far as opening up. It's more one that I like to make that I can reach in, you know, and pretty much I can. If I make a tunnel that's 6 feet tall, then I can pretty much reach in and get stuff from the ends, you know. Once in a while, on a really warm day, I might come open it up completely. So that's another material you can use for tunnels, and then you're not putting down layers and, you know, a hoop every few feet. You're just putting down a tunnel and planting it. I've never really lined those up and made a long tunnel because of the inconvenience of opening them up. So I maybe cover a bed with one, you know, and use it that way. There's another kind of concrete reinforcing wire that looks like a ladder, and they make a nice strong hoop. I've only used those because I inherited some once. I've never bought them. I don't know what they cost. I don't know if they're cost effective. The other very cheap thing to use, and oftentimes you can find it recycled and readily available, is PVC pipe. If it's Schedule 40 white PVC pipe, it'll withstand a lot of snow before it collapses. If it's the black PVC pipe, it will withstand about as much snow as a 9-gauge wire. But it's very cheap, easy to use, and of course you can't jam that pipe in the ground. It's too big of a point. So what you have to do instead is either buy rebar, and you can buy pre-cut pieces at Ingles, or if you're on a tight budget and you have access to some woods where there's a lot of saplings, what I like to do is thin a sapling that's coming, you know, if you cut a tree, a lot of trees like poplar will send up tons of shoots, or maple, and they're not going to make a good tree if they all send up shoots. But I can actually thin them to where they'll make a nice new tree again by taking away all but one of those shoots. And those are nice and straight, and you can cut those, cut them at an angle with your loppers, and they'll drive, and then cut the next one straight so you can hammer it well. They'll drive in the ground quite well and serve quite well to receive the PVC pipe. Good for 1 year. You know, do not expect them to last you the next year, but they'll work great for 1 year, you know. And they're a lot cheaper than rebar. They are renewable. And then the Cadillac of season extension hoops is either rebar or metal conduit, both of which can be bent on a jig that you make in the ground. And indeed, that's, if you watch our video, the very first video we ever made here from November 2011, we show how to make a whole greenhouse bending metal conduit. That's the greenhouse I told you that costs less than $300 with the end walls, less than $200 if you can make cheap end walls. And we simply drove rebar in the ground. And so if you draw, let's say, we're talking about making a hoop here, so we drive rebar in the ground in the shape of a hoop, right? And then on this end here, we drive one more piece, the width apart from the first piece of the thickness of the material we're bending. Now when we stick that end in there, it's captured. Now we just simply take it and bend it around. I haven't recently bent that smallest circle. That might take enough strength that you need to put a cheater bar, a longer piece of pipe that slides over the rebar or the conduit, so you have the strength to bend it. You also have to drive those rebars into strong enough ground that they'll hold. Somebody push the 1 over there. It should say off. The keypad, it should say off. Push the 1 where it says off. Great, thank you. I don't know what we did to trip that alarm, but you know, police may be here any minute. You guys did it, I'm innocent, you know. Anyway, you can bend either conduit's very cheap, rebar's very reasonable. They make a really strong thing. Now, you could figure out, and that would take a little bit more thinking, but it wouldn't be that hard to actually make that into an A-frame, you know, or, and I'm forgetting the word that we use in the greenhouse business, but there's a term for it, and that actually will shed even more snow. And that Gothic, yes, a Gothic. Thank you. You make a Gothic, you know, and that is even better, you know, for a hoop. But really, once you get to the point of bending rebar and conduit, I say watch the video and make a greenhouse. You'll like it so much more. It is so, really, half a day. Half a day you can have that basic structure up. The next day you come back, another half day, you make your end walls. And you got yourself something you can walk into, stand in there, smell the soil, have flowers growing. I mean, basically you have now created your own little Florida vacation, you know. Any sunny day, you're going to be in the 80s, in the middle. It doesn't matter how cold it is outside, that sun's going to build up. Now, if there's a whipping wind, you might only be in the high 60s. But even the high 60s when the temperature is 12 outside and the wind is howling away, pretty wonderful, you know. So I highly recommend that you get to the greenhouse stage pretty quickly. You're intimidated this year, just do the hoops. They'll do it for you. You'll be happy as can be. Okay, have I left anything? Any questions about the tunnels? Are the tunnels pretty clear now? Pretty easy to do, really worthwhile. I should say the 9-gauge wire or the PVC, and actually any of them, some people like to come back with more 9-gauge wire and put it over the top, right where the other rib is. What that does is create a way that you can slide up your plastic and it doesn't blow off. Right? It also keeps that plastic from flapping as much. So it gives you a more rigid greenhouse, which is going to do a little better.
Explain that again, where you put that?
Basically, you've got one piece of 9-gauge wire, right, that's over a bed. The plastic goes over that, right? You come back with another piece, slide it in right next to the first one, over the plastic, and down the other side. So it basically is just holding the plastic in place. It really is extra, but that 9-gauge wire is so reasonable that there's no reason why you shouldn't do it.
Go through the plastic.
No, simply over it, right? So it's simply here. Okay, let me see if I can make something that shows you. This is your tunnel with plastic, right? It's supported by a rib right in the middle, right? So imagine that there's a rib right in the middle of this, right? I put a piece of wire in there and go right over the outside and put it down the other side.
But don't you put it in the plastic on the side there on the ground?
No, I put it just on the outside of it.
On the outside of it?
So it's,
You'll have one on the inside.
there's one on the inside already.
And another going over.
So you're sandwiching it between.
You're missing the sandbag stuff.
Oh, okay, the sandbags are holding it down.
The sandbags are what are holding it down. Yes, yeah. We already covered that. Yes, sandbags or staples are what are holding it down. This, you wouldn't have enough to hold it down with that. You'd use way too many pieces to hold it down, So you have either staples, and by the way, you can get staples at places like feed and seed stores. All the catalogs will very kindly sell you a box of staples for an exorbitant price, or 50 for a ridiculous price. I recommend that you decide you're going to need staples for the rest of your life. You buy a box of 1,000, or you share a box with somebody else. The highest I've seen them go for is $37. If you happen to be driving on 19 West, I guess it is, headed towards Burnsville, Parker Farm Supply, which is the first business on the right after you get off the highway from 26, they sell them. They're still under $30 a box. And so it's a much better deal. You need to use staples, of course. You can also use sandbags. Sandbags, you can go online or find some place that sells actual sandbags. I'm trying to remember where we bought them most recently. We used to get them from a place called Ray's Bags. They went out of business, unfortunately. But you can find sandbags. If you ask around, somebody will have them. Actually, I think that Valley Ag sells them. Lots of feed and seeds kind of places will sell sandbags. They're usually something like 50 cents a bag. And you just fill them with sand or soil. It doesn't really matter what, something heavy. And you set them out there and they work great. If you don't want to buy them, save all your amendment bags. If you use composted cow manure or biochar source or whatever, save those, and those will work very well as sandbags. They'll last several years because the bags are treated to hold up in the sun. So they'll work just as well. And they're actually, I think, more elegant, but they're more work to deploy for sure. If you're hauling out enough sandbags to cover a row like that, you maybe if you're really into being, big and strong, you can handle 2 or 3 in each hand, But each one's going to weigh at least 15 pounds. And it's an awkward weight, So they're going to take a while to deploy, but once they're there, they're incredibly convenient. The nice thing about staples, they're in your back pocket, you pull them out and put them in. The thing that's not nice is it's freezing cold, you want to open it up, your gloves won't grab it, you got to take your gloves off to get it and pull it out, Or the ground's frozen, they won't come out, you can't get in. But this sandbag will slide right off, you can open up and get into your stuff. So
Don't staples damage the fabric?
They do make a hole in the fabric, that's another downside. It's usually just a discrete hole. With a strong enough wind and the wrong fabric, that's how I got that fabric in the trees, ripped off, Turned out it was a deal on fabric from Germany. The reason it was a deal was it wasn't that strong a fabric. Question?
If it's not windy, we use a lot of clothespins because that little notch in the clothespin fits right around that little fiberglass rod.
Yeah, it'll work great if it's not windy, but you know what?
We use a bunch.
We're coming to a time when where they're not going to hold. They'll pop right off, I mean, the big winds are coming,
That's a slightly more industrial wind. It'd be perfect.
You get them to make them, okay? They won't be made in the USA, I know that, Okay, so that's the infrastructure part.
What plastics do you recommend?
You know, any tough, I think Tough Light is one. As long as it's UV treated, it's fine. You can also get ones that are infrared reflective, and those might be nice. I'm not sure if they're certifiable. You can get one that I'm pretty sure is not organically certifiable that keeps condensation from happening. But I'm afraid it's because of a chemical, and I'm pretty sure that's not allowed. I like 6 mil UV treated, usually guaranteed for 4 years. I have kept a greenhouse, which is much bigger and there's many more stretches. Where plastic will die is where you've stretched it to get it nice and tight. That has already started to damage the integrity, and that's where the sun will break it down. The good news is if you have a more permanent structure, you can buy greenhouse repair tape. With greenhouse repair tape, I've kept a greenhouse covered for 11 years before finally, in the bitter cold winter of 2010, the wind ripped it apart and killed my fig tree. And that was because of denial. I knew I had to replace it, but it just, I last replaced it. Actually, I guess it was 10 years because I replaced it in 2000. So it got.
Get that at an ag store or?
You can order it you can get it at places like Fifth Season, Farm Tech online, and Troy's Greenhouse, and give you their phone number in Burnsville, right? All three of those, their phone number, Troy's Greenhouse is the one I memorized because it's my buddy Wade. It's not that I'm just saying go there. Actually, for most people, Fifth Season's a lot closer, and you can find them online easy enough. But Wade's would be a little harder to find online, and his phone number is 828-682-6439. All three of those places I recommend because probably you don't need 100 feet. Almost everybody else is going to make you buy 100 feet. Wade's, or Troy's Greenhouse, I call it Wade's because his daddy died and his daddy was named Troy. But Troy's Greenhouse, Fifth Season, and Farm Tech will all sell it to you by the foot, and that's very convenient. Now, they usually only sell like 2 or 3 sizes, and you probably don't need something as wide as what they sell. They sell 24 or 34 or 40, right? The thing is, you can decide that that's going to be your length, and then you get as much width as you need. And so you can get exactly the width you need. You just have to get at least 24 feet, 34 feet, or 40 feet. So it works fine, And usually, last time I priced it, a 100-foot roll is going to cost someplace around $180 to $250. So you're going to pay some proportion. They're going to charge you a little more, of course, if they're cutting from a roll, but it's pretty cost-effective to do it that way. By the way, last I knew, places like Van Wingerden and big greenhouses like Painters down in Rutherfordton, they change their plastic yearly or every other year. Unlike me, because plastic will quickly start to lose its complete efficiency, and they want maximum efficiency because their space is expensive and they want maximum production. And so they change their plastic, they'll give you it for free. Oftentimes they've got 2 layers. The outside layer is going to have some photo degradation, but the inside layer won't. Now I used to say, because none of these greenhouses are organic, you want the outside layer. Lately I've heard that Van Wingerden is not using any pesticides. They've gone to biocontrols, and if they use anything, it's a systemic. So they probably don't have a lot of nasty stuff on their plastic. And you can get that for free. You just have to hook up with them, find out when to get it, And it's 4-year plastic at the minimum. It's only had 1 or 2 years on it. It's probably worth it if money is more important to you than time. If time is more important, then you're going to buy your plastic. Because, of course, you're not getting a nice deep roll. It's easy to put out, Okay. Then there are the crops that, you didn't ace. That you did, for us, we didn't ace that cauliflower. It didn't go in at the right time. It's not going to do well, likely, unless we have a very mild fall, unless we put a tunnel over it. And then it'll probably make us really nice heads. And so you decide, kale and collards, row cover is probably good enough for as long as I want to eat them, unless I hope to bring them straight through the entire winter. Cauliflower, I need a tunnel, Maybe you got that watermelon radish in as late as you possibly could. I'd say that's someplace approaching the middle of the month, not quite the middle of the month. That month is September. They're not very big yet. If you want them to get nice and big, then maybe you're going to give a tunnel to them. Remember, a tunnel is not only the way, when combined with row cover, to give you the maximum of cold protection, it's also the way to make your crops continue to grow as if it's early fall rather than mid-fall or late fall. Every day is going to be warmer, and so you get more growth. When I first was consulting down here, I taught Rocco all about the tunnels, and I wasn't seeing the growth I expected. And then I realized that every time I came down, the covers were off. I said, so do you have those tunnels on? I said, no, I'm waiting for it to get really cold. I was like, no, it's not just about cold protection. It's about the greenhouse effect. Get those tunnels on. You need that warmth. You got the tunnels on, then I saw the growth I expected. Okay. So what you can still do is have successions going in a little greenhouse. By the way, you don't have a greenhouse, you can't have successions started, right? Wrong. Get a shop light, find a place where you don't mind it being a little wet, start a few flats of stuff, or more than a few flats if you're trying to grow market gardening, and get a warm and a cool bulb. That's harder to find anymore. But if you get a warm and a cool bulb, you can avoid having to buy the grow lights, which are quite expensive. And a warm and a cool bulb will totally do it. Set it up so either you can have the plants on something you can keep removing a little bit so they drop down as they get bigger, or you can raise the lights up. I don't like those swinging lights since it's, fluorescent lights and they have mercury in them. I really don't want those bulbs to break. So I found once and I'm a resource snatcher upper. So someplace somebody was getting rid of stacks and stacks of styrofoam that were about this thick. And I just had those. And I just piled them up and put my plants on top of that. As they grew, I took out a sheet. Kept taking a sheet out. You want those lights to be within 2 inches of the plants, because the sun is not the same as fluorescent lights. It's way stronger. So if you want those plants to be good and strong and healthy, have them right next to the lights. And you can grow all your seedlings there. You are going to want to take them outside whenever you can, like on the weekends. Probably if you work like most people do, you're getting off at 4:30. By the time you get home, it's probably not worth putting them outside for that little bit of time. But make sure, before you put them in the garden, that you put them out every evening when you get home if you can, and then all weekend except for the deep cold. Let them harden off. They want to get that wind, they want to get that cold, so they're not tender like being in a house, And then they can go outside with the protection and they'll do fine, and you can have those successions. That tunnel can keep producing. If you pull the rutabagas out of that tunnel, you can slam a bunch of lettuce in there. You can put a bunch of spinach in there and get a second crop. So that's what you can keep doing. You can keep growing under these tunnels, or if you have a greenhouse. And you do that by having successions of seedlings that come along. You can also direct seed, but do know that you are not keeping that greenhouse as if it never gets cold. Every cold night, it's eventually going to be as cold as outside, or only slightly, ever so slightly warmer. That means seeds that normally germinate in 3 days, or 5 days, or 7 days are going to germinate in 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, or 6 weeks, and it'll germinate. I mean, spinach or something, it's amazing how long it'll sit in that ground, starting to slowly germinate, but will take forever to germinate. So you're better off if you can start seedlings. Otherwise, seize the warm periods and leave that plastic on, let it warm up, get that germination, use the, so it's, we get them every winter, right? Some winters way less than others, but the highs are in the 50s or even the low 60s, and the nights are in the 40s, right? If you had a tunnel on, you could seed then, get it up in the 80s in the daytime, right? Come in, put row cover over it at night, maybe even 2 layers of row cover, never drop the temperature much below 50, and pop all your seedlings. Then we're back in the depths of winter. It doesn't matter because you got your seedlings now. They're going to grow every chance they get. They're not going to be nearly as slow as that germination process. So that's a way to, extend your season with that. We covered infrastructure pretty well, I think. A little out of order, but I don't think we need to cover any more techniques. So we probably covered most of this already, which is good because we're slightly over. We'll go over it real quick though. Okay, yeah, it comes to this is like voice to text that I didn't catch and edit. What that's supposed to say there, set your row cover up, don't go to the orient to do it. Orient it to the windward side. okay? That's what that's supposed to say there. I have no idea how season extension will work if you go all the way to the Orient, but let me know, okay? Okay, set your cover up and leave the tunnels on. We covered that pretty well, right? And leave the ends open on the warmer nights, basically because you want to leave the ends open on the warmer days. You know, if you really were into pushing it, you'd close them, even on the warmer nights, because it'd be a little warmer. But if you're not opening it up early in the day and they overheat, then you're stressing them and they're going to actually have less growth, okay? Back off on the nitrogen. This is huge.
Can
Okay.
you give us some temperature ranges or when,
Yeah.
when to open, when not?
Okay. I wouldn't bother to close any tunnels before it started getting down to the low 40s. And I would only close tunnels in the low 40s if I was trying to really push the growth. You know, they were way behind, you know, like those watermelon radish, you know. They go in that late, they're this size already, they can get softball size. I want them to be growing as if it were early September, late August. So I close it up every night as soon as I can, once the sun is past the point where I step outside and I feel warmed by it. If I close them up before that, I might get it too hot in there. But that's usually sometime this time of year between 4:30 and 6. As soon as I feel that I'm no longer getting that radiant heat, bam, I close it up, you know. If I really want to push it, I even pull the row cover over. But that's only if I can get outside early enough that the row cover is not going to be depriving light. And I'm only going to close it if I know I can open it up so it doesn't get too hot there the next day. Because the daytimes are still in the 60s, you know. Now, the nights go on, it's getting colder and colder. Now we're down in the mid-30s. If I'm trying to keep stuff growing, I'm going to close the ends on everything. On the other hand, if things are pretty much where they want to be, and I'm simply trying to get them to hold and maybe grow slowly, I'll leave them open. It's just less work. You know, the less work, the better. I don't want to overmanage this. I don't want it to become too much of a chore. So, you know, kale and chard and stuff like that, they're all like this tall and I can be picking from them. I just leave them open. The cover's there mostly to get them to grow a little faster in the daytime and for me to protect them from the deep cold, you know. So with those kind of things, actually, I may not even close them up when the temperature hits freezing because they're still not going to frost hard. They may eventually freeze, but they're going to have plenty of time to get their water out and they'll be fine, you know. For other things, I'll probably close it up as soon as it's close to freezing because I'm trying to keep them growing more, you know. And then my definitely close it up temperature for most things is going to be, they're getting to the mid-20s. You know. Now I've discovered that I've not done that because I forgot or I was out late and just too tired and didn't want to do it, and it got down to 22. Still no major damage. Maybe a little bit on the ends, but still there was enough protection. But it's not best practice. You are going to slow things down. There may be more damage. So by mid-20s, I say I'm going to at least close things up. If I'm trying to ace things, I'm probably going to pull row cover by mid-20s too. But I've gotten away plenty of times with not pulling that row cover over until low 20s. And things have been fine. Even things like lettuce. You know, lettuce, the first time I walked out there and saw my lettuce frozen solid, I was sure it was mush, right? You can't freeze lettuce solid and not be mush. But because it froze slowly, as soon as it warmed up, it was growing again. Not a sign of damage. You know? If I hadn't pulled the row cover over, it got down to the low 20s, there'd be some damage. It's not that hardy. Likewise, the chard, there'd be some damage. You know? Now, the spinach, the tatsoi, the mizuna, those kind of things, they won't take damage. They'll wait till they get to the mid-teens to take damage. So it depends on the plant and how cold it is. You know? And I kind of break those down in the beginning there where I talk about the somewhat hardy and the winter stalwarts. You know? Lettuce is actually, I have it in the winter stalwarts because I'm thinking of certain lettuces in particular, and I'll tell you the names of those. Those are the ones that, if you want to be sure they don't take damage without being covered with row cover, you want to grow lettuces like Tango, Rouge de Vert, and that's, you know, R-O-U-G-E, the little, whatever they call it, little mark there. Yeah, D, and then H-E, Rouge de, yeah, right. Yeah. And so Rouge de Vert, Brune de Vert, both Tango and Brune de Vert, and one called Hansen's Winter, actually are so strongly rooted that they can be planted outside, never protected, and they will freeze and die. But the crown won't. As soon as there's a thaw, they'll start to regrow. My favorite example of the incredible cold hardiness and cold weather vigor of Tango As I was working at the Highland Lake Inn, we had a very warm April, and that lettuce was all bolting and looking ugly. And I knew that if it got cold again, it would come back. My boss was like, Pat, take a mower to it, please. It looks like crap. So I mowed it to the nubs, right? We then got typical mountain spring weather. We didn't see any sun, and it was cold as could be all the way up to Mother's Day. The lettuce we served for Mother's Day was tango. It came back totally, made huge heads. So some lettuces, like those three, can actually freeze to the nubs and it'll come back. With protection, any protection, they won't freeze hard enough and you'll be cutting them all winter. Do them all as cut and come again. Another favorite of mine is winter density. Really takes the cold wonderfully. And yet it'll thrive in 3 seasons. It makes a butternut type head at first, and then it goes to a really nice, thick, dense romaine. It's a really wonderful lettuce. A few other like butterheads that really take the cold well and shine in the cold are things like North Pole or Four Seasons. And there's a bunch of other ones. You get into the catalogs and start looking, and you know, years ago, I could rattle off so many lettuces that fit at different times of year, but that was before I discovered that if I used row cover and fabric, they all do fine. You know?
So for the winter stalwarts, you're using row cover and plastic, not just row cover.
I use row cover for these guys up until well into November, unless we get that brutal early cold in November, right? Then I go right to the plastic. Then I'll switch it and I'll drop the row cover down under the hoops, put plastic over it. Even the kale and the chard, the kale and the collards, you get way less damage and way more production if you put them under plastic, you know. But you can push them most winters way into the winter with just row cover, you know. And indeed, they'll go pretty darn far with nothing but, you know, their own ability to harden off. They're quite cold hardy. Likewise, a lot of those stalwarts, but they'll just give you a lot more production if you do row cover until the deep cold comes, and then switch to plastic on top and row cover inside tucked in, you know. But it really has to do with your initiative, how hardy how cold it's been for how long. You know, if we've had a really warm fall and then all of a sudden November starts to get deeply cold, I'd probably go right to the plastic. Because part of it is these plants, if they're growing more rapidly, they have bigger water cells. There's more water to move out. If they've had a lot of cold so that they don't have as big a cells, then they're hardier already. And that's why even kale and collards can be severely damaged by the onset of a brutally cold November, because October wasn't that cold and they're growing a lot more lushly. Likewise, I have a method I use to sheet compost with grass clippings and food waste and then some kind of dry matter on top that causes unbelievable growth, incredible fertility, right? The first time I did that, I did it around brassicas that I had under cover with fabric. They all got killed the first really hard cold because they've been growing so fast, they had such big water cells that they couldn't get enough water out quick enough, and they all took damage. Likewise, if you use too much nitrogen, that'll happen. But that's the piece that still has to be covered. The downside, right, of winter extension. I've given you all the reasons, right? The great flavor of this turnip, right? And all the other reasons, and everything, by the way. Lettuce is sweeter. Things like arugula and spinach aren't just sweeter, they're meatier. You taste all this like protein, you know, this incredibly rich, wonderful. There's nothing I love more than a winter salad. It's just incredible. The textures, the colors, the crispness of it all, it's spectacular. Those are all the reasons to grow and do season extension. The downside is the fabric in the trees, right? The cold fingers, the water in the boot, you know, if you're doing that kind of thing. And the big one that's not talked about a lot, but very real, is if you've used too much nitrogen, or even if you just harvest on a cloudy day between December 10th, roughly, right? The beginning of the second week of December and the middle of February, you could have high levels of nitrates. And those high levels of nitrates can become nitrosamines, can be carcinogenic. Indeed, Northern Europe, babies have died of blue baby syndrome who were fed greens from their parents' gardens because there was that much nitrogen in the food and it got in their blood and there wasn't enough room for oxygen. So you want to harvest at the end of a sunny day. And that's why it's good to be a home grower, because guess what? The big farms, even if they're in some place where it's warm, they're still getting short days. And I guarantee you, they're not saying, oh, it's a sunny day, we can't harvest. You know, so there's going to be higher levels, and they're probably using, even the organic ones, are probably using, because it's warm weather and they can get a lot of growth, more nitrogen than would be ideal and you could end up with higher levels of nitrates. You know, I actually will confess, sometimes I just want greens, and I figure, I'm big and strong, I got a good liver, I'm lucky, and I'll go and harvest them anyways, because even though I know they're not good for me, because I'm dying for greens. You know, the feeling of healthy food is more important to me. But if I'm thinking about it at all, I try to harvest at the end of a sunny day. Simply do that. If you're not overdoing the nitrogen, and you're good, you won't have to worry about it. But the science of that is that the plants are growing nice and fast at the end of a sunny day. They've used up that nitrogen. It's cold out. They just can't use it. So they're storing it. They're storing it in the leaves and the stems. The stems have even more nitrogen in them. So it used to be, I learned this just recently, that the stems had even more nitrogen. So I used to actually take my collards and kale, roll them up in a roll and chiffonade them, chop up the stems fine. Didn't have to take them off. I was getting the fiber. And collards, that's where the sweetest thing, that's the sweetest part. But now that I know there's more nitrogen in there, I'm taking my kale and collards off the stems, especially if I didn't harvest them at the end of a sunny day. I think that's about everything. When and how to protect, I think I've covered that pretty well. Not as one subject, but throughout the whole discussion. You know, are there any questions? People have a pretty good idea how to do this. The catalogs will tell you what your hardiest plants are, but my experience is it mattered to me a whole lot until I learned that the combination of row cover and plastic, if it was half hardy or quarter hardy even, I could keep it going through the deepest of colds. You know, and now I care less about that. Now, if you try to grow things outside without cover, then how hardy stuff is matters a whole lot more. And I've given you some pretty good hints there, but the catalogs will tell you more. And I recommend, like I always do, that you read those catalogs from cover to cover. The cold gets rough, the days are short, your hope is diminishing, you're getting depressed, you pull a catalog out and you could see that the new garden coming up. You know? And you can be prepared by looking at those catalogs. So that's about it. Thank you.